Good day and welcome to the Open Wound Research podcast. My name is Zweli Tuniswa, CEO of Open Wound Research, and today I'm very excited to welcome our next guest on the podcast, and that is the great, inimitable John Schroder. How you doing, John?
I'm doing well. Thanks for that introduction, Swelly. I don't know about formidable or great, but I'm here.
Well, 90% of anything is showing up, and I appreciate that from you. And I know it's a little bit earlier where you are in the country, and I appreciate you getting in early and joining us today for what I think is going to be an incredibly interesting podcast. I think after we're done with it, people are going to realize the depth of experience and knowledge you bring into the space. And as someone who's known you for years, I was saying before we started, I'm just fascinated by your history that I was not aware of. And I just think you have always been an interesting person in the field. And I think it's a great opportunity to share with other people what you've done. So, as many on the podcast viewership may know, John is well known in the industry. He is the CEO of Venture Medical. And by way of background, he has a degree in cell and molecular biology. Again, had no idea that John was such a veritable scientist, but he received that degree from the University of Montana and then spent over the period of a greater part of a decade working at multiple places that we all know, like Sanofi, Aventis, Takeda Pharmaceutical, Johnson and Johnson, Medtronic, Smith and Nephew, ResMed, and now he's at his well, I can't even call it a startup, at his leading company, Wound Care Venture Medical. And he, on the personal side, is a father of four, is an avid reader and learner. And as many of you may tell from the logo in the background, there is an outdoorsman, loves the outdoor sports. And again, something I didn't know, he's also run 2 marathons in his life. So, John, quite a lot that you've done in your personal life and in your career.
Well, thanks, Willie. I guess you just don't think of it while you're doing it, and it's easy to look back on a long career when you're getting long in the tooth, as it were. So, it's been a long journey to what I always knew I wanted to be, which was a voice for patients and someone who was developing new therapies and marketing new therapies that were helping patients.
Absolutely. Let's start at sort of college and your degree in biology. How did you choose to go down the scientific route?
Well, I actually got another degree before that at Arizona State, and it was in sociology with an English minor. And I honestly picked those so I could finish up because my father said, "Well, you need to go to class." And I said, "Well, I am going to class." And he says, "Well, then how come you're getting a 1.8 grade point average?" And I really wasn't going to class, so it was the money was going to run out if I didn't pick something that I already had all the classes done for. So I went back, and I thought perhaps I'd go to medical school. I'd always had an interest in microbiology and what we could harness out of bacteria. And you know, in the 80s and 90s, polymerase chain reactions were starting to become really important and bold in both medicine and industry. And so I decided to focus on that at University of Montana.
Absolutely. And when you graduated, what was your first gig out of school?
So my first gig out of school was actually before University of Montana, and it's a long story, but I started out in industrial sales, and in a year and a half, I made triple my base, no, 6 times my base salary, and I got really bored, and I'm like, this is not what I want to do with my life, and I don't want to be in Florida. I don't even know how I got here. I said I want to be in Montana, so I moved here, and the rest is kind of history. You know, I raised 4 kids here. They all knew the same friends from first grade through high school. 2 of them are out east now. One of them's a professor in the Coast Guard. Another one is starting his what will be his last year at the Coast Guard Academy. And they're both in sciences. So science kind of runs a little bit deeper in our family. I've got another kid in Oregon and another one right here studying business and economics. So it was the right move. It's the right place. A lot of people refer to Missoula, Montana as a vortex. I'm not really sure what that means to a lot of people, but for me, I've always referred to it as the center of the universe. And the farther away you go from it, the more you want to get back. And it's always whether I'm flying home from Europe or flying home from Chicago or Arizona, where I grew up. Every time I see the clouds part and the valley start to open up and I realize I'm going home, there's always a sigh of relief, and my blood pressure goes down. So I don't know how big city people do it. I can visit. I could never live in them. So
And I think a lot of people, I didn't know much about Montana, and then Yellowstone came out, and I think there's this, interest in the state and sort of the, cowboy culture and so forth. So I can't pretend I know in real life. I'd love to visit, but from what I've seen on the show, it's there's a different culture up there, different values.
well, you said you didn't know much about Montana before you watched the show, and I would say you still don't. The show is utter fiction. But no, I mean, it's filmed about 40 minutes south of here from my house, and a lot of the in-town scenes were filmed here. Matter of fact, in the Breakfast Greasy Spoon that I like to visit all the time is where they did a shoot 'em up scene that was pretty famous. My kids have both, two of my kids have been extras on the set, and in fact, my ex-wife was a court reporter, and the hospital that they fictitiously call the Bozeman Hospital is our hospital. So it's really interesting to be walking around town and having them film people. I ran into Kevin Costner at Ace Hardware of all places one time. So yeah, it's interesting, but it's really, the scenery is accurate. That's where we live, but all of the different you know drama about the cattle board and things like that, those things don't exist. So
All right, well then,
blowing up of creeks and things like that.
well, it seemed exciting. I'll have to come up and take a look.
You
But
should.
so, and so you move up to Montana, and perhaps walk me through sort of your professional career from Sanofi all the way to venture, kind of the different stops you took and the different areas that you worked in.
So Sanofi Aventis, it started out was Marion Merrill Dow, then Herx Marion Russell, and they had a bunch of different drugs. And the first drug that I really took a liking to was a sulfonylurea called Amaryl. It was for diabetes, and it would convince your pancreas to put out a little more insulin. But it had a little difference in the science from other drugs in the class, and so I ended up starting to really like selling that drug as opposed to the others in my portfolio, and ended up working with the Indian reservations to convince them that this was a better medication for their members than the others on the market, and showed them why with the science, and really got a taste for the diabetic patient and the struggles. And then so along came Takeda Pharmaceuticals, who had before that been involved a little bit in the U.S., but not really with their own sales force. And they had a new class of medication coming for diabetes, and it was a really good opportunity for me to learn a lot more. And so I moved over there and eventually became a district manager. And after the first move out of Montana, they wanted me to move again, and I said no, I'm going back to Montana, and went and worked for Johnson Johnson for a little while, and then Medtronic convinced me to come over with to sell continuous glucose sensors and insulin pumps. So again, still in diabetes the whole time. I did a little. I went and started Venture Medical, and there were the original product line that we had was for Smith and Nephew. And I'm forgetting about Smith and Nephew. After Medtronic, I went over to Smith and Nephew. My boss actually led me over there. He was my boss 3 different times, and he asked me to come over and start selling negative pressure wound therapy. And I thought, well, what is that? It's just a vacuum. And, it got me into the hospital, and it got me into more critically ill patients, and more than patients that just had diabetes or diabetic foot ulcer, chronically, ill patients with big wounds. And so I launched the negative pressure system for Smith and Nephew that they had, that was going to compete with KCI, and it really didn't. It was pulled off the market. So, but that was after a long chain of events with Smith and Nephew, where they decided some June, I can't remember what year it was, that they were going to eliminate all their rural reps in this flyover country, right? And so there was about 11 of us that were in small geographies, what they considered small geographies. But then they made this decision at an executive meeting in London in June, and then come back in October, and I'm the number one sales rep in the country. So they decided they still had to fire me or let me go, because they'd already made the decision in England, but they didn't want to let me go. So they ended up creating Venture Medical sort of for me by saying, well, why can't you just do what you're doing for us and add on some of the dressings and add on the Versajet, and cover the whole inland Northwest? And so that started that. And then subsequent to that, we lost the main product line. I took a side gig at ResMed, and kind of built out the company slowly with new products as they came. However, there wasn't a lot of innovation in wound care for a while. I remember the first graft we sold was Oasis, and it was really, I don't know, it really didn't seem to improve a whole lot of things. It's porcine submucosa, and processed a number of different ways. Nothing like what we have today, but yeah, so it just took a while to kind of build momentum with Venture. I built a team in the Northwest. I'd say about 17 or 18, it started to really pick up. And we started expanding into places like Texas and Arizona. But we had traditionally started out really just in the Dakotas and Montana, Wyoming. Then we moved up into Alaska and Washington and Oregon. And really I think maybe about 21, we started to kind of go national. We started pushing the boundaries of where we were out of that kind of notion that I had that we needed to stay in the West, but don't go into California, because California's tough, and it is. It's definitely full of competition. But I think about 21, we decided to take the gloves off and really just go national. And I have never looked back. I think there's maybe 2 states that we don't have a rep in. One of them being Maine. I think the other one's Arkansas. But everywhere else we have a presence, and truly nationally we have a presence. So it's been quite a journey.
That's impressive. And what is the difference that you've seen in selling to more rural territories, like your home territory, versus more competitive territories and more urban territories? What are the big differences that you've seen in the needs that need to be met?
Wow. So it's kind of interesting. I'm in a podiatrist's office in Great Falls, Montana. This is probably 4 or 5 years ago, and the nurse interrupts. We were seeing a patient, and he was showing me what he was thinking he was going to do on a wound on this patient, and asking me a couple questions. And we walk out of that patient room, and the nurse interrupts and says, "We've got to see this guy right now." And he says, "Well, why can't he just schedule an appointment?" And she says, "Well, he's 92 years old. He hitched a ride with a neighbor, and he says he has to go back and take care of his cows. And by the way, they drove in their pickup truck 75 miles to get here to see you." And so Andy and I are looking at each other like, why is this so urgent? It's okay. She rooms the patient. We go in there, and he takes his boot off, and literally you see what looks like a dog chew, a rawhide strip of his Achilles tendon left, and a wound has eroded everything around it, and there's like air between the back of his distal tibia and fibula and the tendon. It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. And the guy says, "Yeah, I got tired of this thing, and it's starting to really bother me, so I had to come in." And the doc is like, "Well, we really need to admit you. Like, this is pretty serious, you know." And he says, You can't admit me. I got to go back and take care of my cows. I have 75 cows I got to feed tonight. And I don't drive anymore, so I had my neighbor drive me in." And he said, "Well, don't you have anybody living with you?" He's like, "No, I live alone." "Well, how old are you?" "I'm 92. I think that kind of talks a little bit about rural medicine, right? I don't think we see situations like that in the suburbs.
And if we did, we'd become really concerned.
Yeah, yeah. But beyond that, it's interesting because when you're calling on docs in Montana, when you're carrying a bag and you're calling on docs in Montana, there's just a different air around the whole process. You know, I've had the opportunity to call on docs all over the country, from California to New Jersey to Florida, to Chicago to Detroit, you know, Texas, everywhere. And it's definitely a little bit more relaxed in like Montana or Wyoming, but they definitely aren't going to buy anything from you for a long time. So I think a lot of folks in the larger areas might feel jealous of us a little bit that we have good access to providers in some of these rural areas, and not all. For example, Anchorage, Alaska is really locked down. It's really hard to, and people wouldn't know that about it, right? And Las Vegas is very, very open, you know, comparatively to a lot of the rural West. Maybe it's just because it's sunny there and people are happier. I don't know. But access does not equal access to their pocketbooks. Selling stuff to folks in the rural Northwest or the rural West, they really need to be shown. They don't trust. They don't take likely to spending a lot of money on new medical products, or having their hospital or Medicare spend a lot of money on new medical products. So it's really a very different environment, if that makes any sense.
No, it actually makes sense. When the Medicare comes out with their expenditure reports on the per capita expenditure, and the highest expenditures are, for example, down in Texas or parts of Arizona, California, the places you'd kind of expect. But the expenditures on a per capita basis are so low, relatively, in some of the areas that you've just described. You know, and some of it is a function of access, of course, but some of it is a function of different consumptive habits, where,
Sure.
you know, people just consume healthcare and healthcare products differently, you know. And some of it may be good, some of it may be bad, you know, like your gentleman who obviously needed to consume some hospital services, but he had more important things to do, like feed these 90-yard cows.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing is he never lost his foot. They were able to save his ankle. I can't remember what they did, but there was some sort of like, I think they just kind of froze it in place, you know, so that it didn't need the Achilles anymore. I mean, I'm sure he's gone by now. That's been, well, he was already 92, and that's been probably 5 to 7 years ago. So, although my grandmother lived to be 104, so who knows? Maybe he's still around.
Yeah, who knows? And so, you know, it's really interesting to me, because usually we think of the people we've had in the show, and we think of wound care as a service, right? And I've come from a service background, so for me, this is fascinating listening to wound care as a product, and having to explain how products are used. I think it's more intuitive to people to think of wound care as a service, because it's an intuitive thing. But wound care as a product is, to me, kind of a not a black hole, but something that I just poorly understand. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to really talk about this, because I don't think enough people from the services side understand the product side. Whereas I feel like the product side, in order to allow their products to come to the market, have to understand the service side. I don't know if you agree about that.
Sure. No, I completely agree. I mean, wound care, just because it has the word care in it, is definitely a service, right? But what is the product we're trying to deliver? We're trying to deliver a healed wound. Um, and a healed wound is a really complex thing to deliver, because there's so many factors that go into why that wound won't heal. Whether it's biofilm, whether it's nutrition, offloading. There's social factors that prevent people from solving those problems too. Um, there's just so many different things that are contributing to that hole in the patient, um, that it's really hard to deliver that end product that we want of that healing. And even when we do, oftentimes those wounds will reopen, especially if you think about a VLU that, someone refuses compression, um, or a DFU where they refuse to offload, and we're right now good at recreating fat pads under the skin that we formed on the bottom of the foot. So, um, you know, it's a product that needs the service of people to discern what products to use to get the end product that they want, right? And there are a lot of different products in wound care, a lot of different machines, a lot of different dressings, a lot of different thoughts about how we can improve healing. Um, I can't think of another field with more individual products that people are trying to launch or have launched, or swear by, and other people say they don't work. You think about all the major dressing brands. Some people swear by, an alginate from one company like Convatec, or they hate this from Coloplast, but they like the one from Medline. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of ancillary products and smaller that people don't think a lot about when they're using them. But everybody who brought that to market thought a lot about it. And the higher value those products get, the more they thought about it and the more they put into it, and both time and money to get it there.
No, that's it's very interesting. I mean, we've talked a little bit about your origin story in wound care, and it sounds like you came from diabetes predominantly. Then with Smith and Nephew, you got into negative pressure, and that kind of opened the door into wound care. So given your background in diabetes, and I've always been fascinated by the interplay between diabetes and wound care. But if I could take us on a little side path here for a minute or two, there's this growth in diabetes medicine, metabolic disease with the CGMs and applications that are growing there. What's your view on that market as it stands right now, and what its potential is to help in the long run in wound care, if you see any interplay there?
So I think that diabetes may plateau really soon, because some key things have happened. We have somebody in the government now who is profoundly aware and alarmed by our food supply. RFK Jr. I mean, if you look at the utilization of high fructose corn syrup and the incidence of obesity and diabetes in this country, the lines are exactly parallel. They mirror each other. So that's just one example. The problem is that it's not as complicated as saying we're going to ban all these different types of foods right away, because the entire agribusiness sector is set up to farm corn and beans, soybeans and corn, and make a variety of things out of those things. And those things are subsidized, and all the machinery is set up, and all the fields are set up, and all the irrigation is set up to pursue this aggressive monocrop agriculture with heavy induction of fertilizers and pesticides and chemicals. But I guess how I'm digressing is that you have somebody who's aware that somewhere along the line, diet became responsible for really causing massive amounts of inflammation, and I include obesity in inflammation because that's truly what it is. And I think that what we may be plateauing because people are becoming more and more aware of what's in their food and picking up a label and reading it at the grocery store, especially the younger generation who are teaching the older generation. One of my kids has taught me, when you're looking for a protein supplement, you need to have one that has 4 ingredients or less, or you're not buying it. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll listen to you. And I mean, it's things like people getting really shocked with the price of eggs at the grocery store. Well, there are people all over your neighborhood that are growing eggs, so why not get them from them? It's probably going to be more healthy. They're probably eating bugs and stuff that's going to give them more omega-3 fatty acids, which are going to protect you from things like diabetes. So in a roundabout way, diet has become really front and center to a lot of people, and not like, oh, I'm on the Mediterranean diet or I'm on the keto diet. Everybody's paying attention to what the crap is in the food in the center of the grocery store and the shiny boxes made in a factory. That's really important, and it hasn't been done before. Um, Food is not fun anymore. It was marketed to us for 25 or 30 years as eat this fun food. And now I just open a pack of, or a bag of Cheetos, and I look at it and I say, I used to love this shit, but I can't do this to my body anymore. And I think there's a growing generation of people that will change. So with that awareness and with improvements in diet, I think that diabetes may have plateaued, or it will really soon, at least in our country. But treating diabetes is definitely going to help with wound care. I mean, diabetes is simply a microvascular and macrovascular cardiovascular disease that's masked or characterized by high blood sugar. You don't die from the high blood sugar. You die from the peripheral artery disease and the large artery disease and the atherosclerosis and the strokes, right? All of that is an inflammatory process and occlusion of arteries that end up causing lots of wounds too, right? So if we can get, in terms of the CGM, boy, I'm gonna go get one of those. Now that they're so small and they can put one in your arm, and you can have it in there for like 6 months and just recalibrate it like once a week or something like that. I gotta have one because I want to see what my postprandial sugars are looking like. I mean, I'm getting older. I want to see if I hit 200 or not. I better not. Last day, HbA1c I had was about 5.9, which is getting a little bit. Some people would say, "Oh, that's a little bit too high." It's totally normal, but I think we all need to be aware of what we're doing to our bodies with the food that we're eating. We think something says, no sugar, like Coke Zero. Now, that's one of my vices. I love Coke Zero, right? I love a Coke Zero with the orange and the orange creamsicle flavor in it, and that's my dessert at night. But it's got all that stevia and shit in it. I don't know what that's doing to my insulin levels or my blood sugar levels. I don't know what it does. Do we really know? I'm curious. What are we doing to keep ourselves overweight? What are we doing to keep ourselves full of inflammation? And by the way, inflammation has a lot more implications than just, cardiovascular disease and wound care and diabetes. It also has we're talking about things that cause Parkinson's and ALS. And I mean, essentially all of the modern diseases can be traced back to inflammation that started around the time we started focusing on high fructose corn syrup as a cheap energy source in the shiny packages in our grocery store.
Yeah.
Did
I've
I say too? Did I say too much? I'm sorry.
No, 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 no. This is great. This is great. No, I appreciate that because I've talked to people in wound care, and there's definitely a class of people who say that the wounds are a symptom of other things, right? Like we know that to be mostly true. And so, if we say that wounds at the end of life or when people reach 65 are a function of choices and things they've put into the body over a long period of time, then one must surmise that if we can get downstream and at least not do horrific things to our bodies, that in the long run we will be able to obviate a lot of the wounds that come to the fore. I think it's a conversation that we ought to be having. I don't think, and I think that the science around cardiovascular disease, my my grandfather died from a stroke, you know, and I never thought of it as a cardiovascular disease. I just didn't. And then I started talking to providers, and you sit there going, "Wow, okay, I didn't get that." And I had one provider talk about pressure ulcers as being a stroke of the skin, and I'd never thought about it that way. But once I kind of thought about it a little bit deeper, I said, is it a perfect analogy? Maybe not, but it kind of makes sense, you know?
Yeah, the other half of the equation as well is, you know, we don't see pressure ulcers in folks that are under 65,
Oh, yeah,
really.
absolutely.
You just don't see it, right? So why do we see it? We see it because they ran out of their ability to move. And so we also have to think about what causes people to lose their mobility, right? And outside of diabetes, we've got these little screens, right? I mean, how much attention do we need to pay to these things, right? I see pictures of people on vacation where the whole family's looking at their phone, and behind them is this beautiful beach, and dad's taking a picture of the beach with their kids in front of it, and they're all on their phone. So I think the other side of it is movement, right? And you're right. I mean, a pressure ulcer is ischemia. It is a stroke of the skin, but we don't see it before 65. So what happens to people at 65? Well, they retire. I don't know if I'll ever retire. I don't want that for myself. And the folks that I know that are in their 70s and 80s, my father's 82 and he still does medical missions all over the world. He keeps telling me he's going to stop going. He's going to stop recruiting everybody. He's going to stop getting all the medicine. He's going to stop flying 18,000 miles around the planet and all this stuff. He's never going to stop. He's 140 pounds of pure passion when it comes to delivering medicine to folks that don't have it, right? But he's in great shape. But then I see people that actually do this traditional retirement and they lose their minds and they lose their mobility, and you can only play so much golf. And then you transition down from tennis to pickleball because your knees hurt and your ankles hurt. And then, oh shit, pickleball is too hard. By a few years, you're just not moving anymore. So you get some pressure ulcers, whether you have diabetes or not. So, I mean, I'm oversimplifying for effect, but we really have to address those two things is movement and food. It's pretty simple.
No, makes sense to me. I think Pamela Scarborough, for example, we had her on the podcast, and she voiced similar opinions around the link between diet, movement, and ulcerations. So, if we can if we can move back into the realm of directly into wound care, the one question that I want to make sure that I ask you is when you go to the supermarket, you never think about how the food gets there, right? Like you go, oh, it's here, it works, great. And then you realize there's a distribution channel, there's sourcing, there's all these things that have to happen to make things available at the supermarket for you. And maybe if you could talk about some of the challenges there are to source the products that people use every day in their wound care. Finding a new product or making sure there's enough product. If the product's from overseas, making sure it's able to get here. Could you walk us through some of those challenges in sourcing products? I don't understand any of it, and I think a lot of the
Sure.
audience doesn't.
Well, I think sourcing products is one thing, because in order to find a product on the shelf in the U.S., it's been through a regulatory process that can involve a lot of things depending on what it is. If it's a dressing, it's probably going to, have a predicate to another older dressing. So it's a relatively straightforward approval process with the FDA. And then it's all about, looking at your manufacturing controls and your quality measures to make sure that, FDA makes sure that way that you're manufacturing the product that's sterile and it's in the form that you are, studied against the predicate device or product. So the FDA is a challenge, but people don't understand, like when you conceive of a product that I want to bring into the country. Let's say that I want to bring in an entirely new laser treatment that works wonders on healing wounds. In 4 weeks, I can heal all wounds with that product. Well, first of all, there's lots of people out there around the world that are trying to sell me a device like that, right? There's, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 companies that have contacted me this year that want to bring a new type of therapy to market. Everything from cold plasma to electrostatic to shockwave to light therapies to all different types of things, and lots of different technologies that have promised, they say, to heal these wounds. And so I've looked at a lot of them, and we find this problem. It's kind of called the $20 million club. Founders of technologies get $20 million invested into something, and they've put the wrong things first in their minds, and they get stuck, and then they want to sell because they realize they're still 3 to 5 years out, and they need another $10 million to get anywhere. Well, it has to be a pretty important product for somebody to come in and buy them out for what they've already spent on it, and then spend another 10 million, which is going to turn into another 20 million. And really, so what I like to talk about is you really have to start with the very end in mind. So you have to, if you want to be successful with a new idea, and I've had a lot of new ideas. I haven't commercialized one of my own ideas. I've commercialized other people's ideas. It just hasn't worked out. But Ideas are great, but they're also addicting and intoxicating. And if you're a good salesman like I am, they're also addictive and intoxicating to the investor groups. And so people end up dumping a bunch of money in without answering the end question, which isn't out about the FDA approval. It's how the hell am I going to get CMS to pay for this? And what am I going to get them to pay? And what's reasonable, right? So, and because if you have no idea what your revenue is going to be, how do you know how much you can invest before you say, okay, this was a great idea, but I need to move on? That's the problem, is people don't ever think about what channel, what direction do I want to do. Do I want this to be durable medical equipment? Is this going to be 510K to a predicate device? Is this a drug? Is it going to be a biologic? Do I need a BMA? And so, okay, well, how much am I going to spend on that? Well, okay, it's great to know how much you're going to spend, but how much are you going to earn when you're done with that process? And what's the present value of the money invested today to get there, right? So if I'm going to do a BMA and I'm going to develop a biologic, or I'm going to do a PMA and I'm going to develop a drug, I need to count on spending at least $20 million over 10 years. So what's the present value, that 20 million that I've spent over that time? What's the opportunity cost? Can I commercialize said drug or device for enough money to provide my investors enough return on their investment to wait 5, 6, 7 years? And so I'm constantly looking at trying to figure out what's the end game. We're doing it right now. As a matter of fact, we have a technology that we have under license that well, actually not on license, we bought it. That we're trying to figure out, well, do we want to move this into the burn space, or would it be better into the wound space? Or could we make a formulation for both? Or how expensive would that be to make two different formulations and do two different 510Ks? Oh, and should we add an antimicrobial to it? So you can go from spending 2 million to 10 million really fast, even on a 510K, right? But then you have to understand, okay, well, if I put this in the burn space, how much am I going to get paid for it? They're spending about $20 a square centimeter on cadaver skin, maybe 30. They do a lot of split thickness skin grafts, which really don't cost them anything in material costs. They actually generate their own revenue. And that's the basis of a lot of the revenue in the burn centers. And they're all state run. They don't have a lot of money. So if I'm going to make that burn dressing, I better be able to make it really cheap. Well, if I'm going to do it in wound care, who knows what's going to happen with skin substitutes? I mean, right now people are making bajillions of dollars on them, which, we're all blessed to make a good living right now, but I think that's going to change. I think it's going to be a lot less of a good living, and rightfully so. But in the wound space, what is its relative value to something like negative pressure? Or what is its relative value to the dressings we already have out there? There's been like 95 studies that Cochrane has reviewed and seen no value to adding silver to a dressing. None. But yet there's over $100 million in silver dressings sold. So can I create more value with some new whiz bang? Undoubtedly you can, but how are you going to overcome the inertia that's clinically already there using those dressings? How much money are you going to be able to make, because those dressings are basically set out into the categories in DME that set the prices, and there's only $16 for this and $23 for that available, unless you want to get a completely new HCPCS code, which they don't like giving you a new HCPCS code. And by the way, if you do that, you can't really predicate to something else that already has a HCPCS code. So I'm not trying to be overly complicated, but it's really in thinking about how you're going to come to market that's hard. There are a bajillion ideas out there, and a lot of them are really good. I mean, even somebody's even grinding up shrimp shells, literally to get the chitin out of them, and making a paste out of that. There's somebody using nanotech to make fibers that look like a spider web, but then they actually seal up a wound. And once you get it very clean and with anti-biofilm strategies, you can seal it up for 2 weeks, and then the seal will fall off. There's some really cool things out there. It really has nothing to do with an absence of ideas. The world is awash in ideas and great intentions, but we all know where the road to hell was paved with, right? Great intentions. So that's the problem. It's the devil's in the details and how you get it to market, and really knowing that you have something that's valuable enough, that's worth the time and the money to get through the FDA. But then after you get through FDA, what pathway do you think CMS should be paying this under? And why and how much? And are you prepared to have a temporary code like a T code for 2 or 3 years while you assemble more data your real world evidence on the treatment effect to justify the price. So I've been kind of talking a lot about a process that I'm pretty intimately involved in a lot of different phases with a lot of different products. And I think between now and 5 years from now, people will understand what I'm saying, because we'll come out to market with some pretty cool stuff that's nothing like anything that's out there now. But there's not a lot of forgiveness in this whole process between the FDA and then walking over to CMS. And if you want to go the cash route, there's plenty of things you can do, but people just don't really take responsibility for their own health and pay cash to a large portion. So you better be focusing on patients that actually spend a lot of money on their own health care. And that's not patients that have chronic wounds, unfortunately. A lot of them really don't spend a lot of money on their health care. By and large, the people that are spending a lot of money on their health care are people that want to, augment their this or their that, or nip and tuck this and make this look better. Those folks will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash. But the folks with chronic diseases that cause them to have wounds, they don't have that kind of cash left over anymore to do ordinarily as a class.
No, and I think I enjoy listening to this because a lot of the time the conversation in wound care can get very binary, right? With regard to products or investments that have to come in. It's either, laissez-faire, or it's everything's evil if there is a profit motive attached to it. And I think American healthcare, as we know, is a complicated beast. But I think it, in my estimation at least, is the best healthcare system in many different ways, because of the innovation, because of the resources that the market and the government are willing to bring to bear to innovate. And the rest of the world benefits because they can price control and get the benefit of
Yeah.
all that innovation,
Yeah. They
right?
can price
And
control so we can subsidize. Yeah.
exactly. I got into a fight, I think I said in a previous podcast, with at Yuma in Sweden a couple of years back. I was debating someone from Europe, and I said, but it's great. I power to you. But many of the innovations that your system uses is from is from primarily from the United States, which
Right.
innovates. So
Exactly.
you can price control, but you've effectively received a subsidy. And in my home country, they price control medications down there. And it was necessary for HIV/AIDS. And in fact, a lot of the pharmaceutical companies said, we'll give it to you for free, but you shouldn't price control, because what's going to happen is that companies aren't going to bring these products down here because there's no point. And that's exactly what happened. And we saw it during COVID, when we were a year and a half behind on getting COVID vaccinations at the height of that. So this is fascinating, because I think it's important in wound care that we have a conversation that recognizes the work that everyone does in the industry,
Yeah.
be it research, clinical products, etc.
Yeah. I mean, all through that diatribe that I just delivered didn't really talk about, what if you're going to go through a process that's not a 510K and you have to do randomized controlled trials. I mean, a lot of people talk about being committed to science and liking they want to be involved in a trial, right? uh, it's a little more complicated than you think. I mean, you really have to have a practice set up for it, and that's why we keep gravitating to sites that are managed by some of the same people, because those folks can churn out patients appropriately. They can interview the patient, they can intake the patient, they can keep far more as a percentage of patients in the trial than others can, because they know how to do it, right? There's a lot to a clinical trial, and it takes a lot longer than you might think. I mean, even just getting to the place where your IRB approves the trial, it can take way more time than you think. And then enrolling patients, you might see 10 patients for every patient that meets it through your enrollment criteria, depending on what you're trying to do. And all the time, I'm paying for those patients to go be interviewed, and the provider is charging me for them, but they know they're not going to be in the study. So, I mean, there's a lot that happens in just developing randomized control trials, which is the benchmark that we're probably going to continue to use for approval on everything, right? not everything. I mean, we're still going to have 361 tissues that are approved based on being homologous use and minimally manipulated. But now they're going to try to inject a coverage criteria, an approval criteria from the FDA into coverage criteria at CMS. So we're all going to be doing a lot more of those trials, which I fundamentally disagree with on its face, because we should really be using real world evidence for that. But even though I spent a long time talking about the challenges and the dilemmas of bringing products to work, I really just touched on a fraction of it, right? It's not just the money and the time. It's making decisions, and if you make one wrong decision along the way, you've made yourself go down a pathway that could cost you years and lots of profits. So of course people are consumed with making a profit. I don't have any friends left in the drug industry, but because I basically spoke my mind too much over in that industry. But they do spend about $1 billion to launch a blockbuster drug, at least $1 billion with a B. So, I mean, we don't do that in device, but we spend a lot of money and a lot of time and make a lot of decisions that at any given time sounded good at the time, but all of a sudden we've just eliminated 90% of the patients we'd have available to us at the end by going down this pathway for approval that we never really intended would be taken so seriously by the FDA or so rigidly by the FDA, right? All right, so scrap that idea. Let's go with another one. There's another 10 million. It's literally that difficult.
It's extraordinary. I think I'd love to talk to more people like yourself, and even perhaps even have a roundtable on the podcast, because once you go down the rabbit hole of how this all works, it's very complicated. It's very onerous, and for people like yourself that are trying to bring the right things to market, it is. I don't think people really understand the complexity of the system and how that system can change and iterate over time as new administrations come in. As other, there's so much going on. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you talking about that. So we've got about 15 minutes, and I want to make sure that we talk about one area that has been talked about for quite some period of time, and that's the area of skin subs and caps, aka caps. So if you would, I think you could provide a really good kind of history on caps, the growth that we've seen from 2017. Maybe talk a little bit about the LCDs and what you think the future is going to be, given where we are.
Sure. So, just in the past, like I said, the first skin sub I sold was, I think it was back in like 2009 or 2010. We started selling Oasis, which was just a pig intestine, submucosa, but sometime after that, my medics came out with Epifix, and they did so with a drug-like approval. So they used randomized controlled trials on diabetic foot ulcers and venous leg ulcers, which they were the first truly placental tissue derived skin substitute. And thereafter, the approval process changed to one of where, well, this is really just a transplanted material from one patient to another, and it is sort of homologous use because the placenta is used to cover and protect the baby. So that means that if we're covering a wound with it, it's a homologous use with how it was used in the donor, actually now in the recipient. And so there's a whole prescription for how you can minimally manipulate a product like that from one donor to the next recipient, to keep it compliant with that line of thinking. So subsequently, products after MiMedx really didn't require the rigor of data to come out. And I think probably till like 2020, most products were under a few $100s a square centimeter. I mean, the vast majority, I think the first one that came out that was over that was Zenith, but from Legacy Group, and it was about $400. And I think Tides had some early products that were $400 and $500 and $600. And so really it wasn't really an explosive amount of price growth, and so market growth because of price growth until after then. But new products were coming to market, setting their own price, and then going into different MACs that allow for a local coverage determination, or I'm sorry, a local fee schedule, and applying for a local fee schedule price. So like WPS in the Midwest, and First Coast and Novitas in Texas and Florida, Palmetto in the Southeast. They'll all let you kind of set a price and then sell it locally. But then a regulation was coming, and we all knew it was coming in January of 2022, that instituted the ASP pricing model on skin substitutes that had been the drug pricing model for years. I think they instituted that there, and gosh, they formally instituted it in 2008. But I think it was well before that they actually started. There were ASPs before that. It's kind of a formal pricing method for government that uses all across, from everything like ashtrays and the fighter jets that cost us $500 million, for the ashtray, but it's ASP plus 6. But that had a lot of unintended consequences that came along with it. So what would you do if you were a company and you wanted to be able to sell a product, but your physician's going to lose money on it if you don't discount it from what the reimbursement's going to be? Well, you might sell it to him at the price that he's going to be reimbursed, and then give him a rebate when he pays you the bill. Well, that became illegal in 2020 or 2021. Not really effectively illegal, but it never was legal or illegal. It was sort of frowned upon and misunderstood by the MACs, and then clarified in 2021 that they didn't want to see any discrepancies in what providers paid and what they paid out. In other words, they defined what a rebate was, and they said, and they defined what a discount was, and everybody had to go to the ASP model, which would basically mean if you sell to a provider at a discount, then the next quarter your price is at that discount, and you must discount even further to provide a discount to a provider under the ASP. So it's supposed to be a mechanism for lowering prices over time constantly. However, the 2008 Affordable Care Act also created some caveats that allowed businesses to sort of stabilize the pricing and not report exactly what they're actually selling to the providers at. So what you've seen since 2021 is prices that were averaging like $100 to $200, $400 a square centimeter. Now they're up to $2,500. There's a new one out at $4,700 per square centimeter. So the spend has become very noticeable. And there's literally people screaming back and forth at each other about this in the industry. But I kind of look at it at like, if you were given a booklet for your 1040 tax form that said these are the deductions you can take, would you just not take the deductions because you didn't think that they were ethical? No, you'd say the system's wrong, government, close the loopholes, right? And I think most of us in industry have been basically saying we would like to see a rational and reasonable pricing in this substitute market, because there's really nothing that's more effective out there. There's no single modality that's more effective at healing wounds faster than really the skin substitutes, the camps. So if we know that we need them, and we know that we can't afford to keep paying, the pricing that we're paying for them, because now companies just come out, set a price, and sometimes it drifts down, sometimes it doesn't, based on competition. And the only remedy to get more market share so you can study your product with real world evidence is to have a high price. But then if yours is eclipsed by 20 products, well, I guess you got to come out with a new product and try to study that one so that you can get some evidence on that one at a higher price. So there's been what I call a classic melt up in the pricing. It's kind of like the Dutch tulip frenzy in the 1600s. Everyone's afraid that they're going to be irrelevant, so they raise their price, and the doctors are afraid they're going to take it all away, and they are taking it all away with clawbacks and denials. So they're like, well, I got to make more money now because I just got clawed back $300,000 for last year. They just took back all of my patient care last year. So now I got to make more money. So I have to use a more expensive product. So we're in kind of a little bit of an untenable spiral upward towards the sun in terms of pricing. And the wax that holds our feathers on our backs is going to start to melt here pretty quickly. So, but I think that there's a bright future for camps. And I think that the way that future comes about is you have to start by stabilizing everything and giving predictability to physicians, which means you have to stop with the egregious methods that they're using to audit and claw back funds from providers, which they're deploying because they need to control costs because costs are rising. So stop the madness by capping the price on all of them. Then maybe set a price for all entry level products. And what I mean by entry level is if you want to send a new camp to market and get it approved the way the FDA says you can get it approved, whether it's a 510K or it's a 361 or whatever, that's fine. You can have access to the markets, but we're not going to pay you more than like this baseline fee for that product at Medicare until you've done some real world evidence and some RCTs to show me that it's more effective than other products or simply just more effective than placebo. It would even be helpful. We know that they are. But in setting up a program where companies have to endeavor to get 3 or 4 years worth of evidence behind them, I think, and there's a cap to the market, I think that you're going to see a lot less of the price run-ups that we've seen, which will create sustainability and predictability for the providers. It'll take the pressure off of the MACs to do all, and the UPIC contractors to stop auditing so much. And then we can get on with patient care. I think it's going to be a little choppy for the next 6 months, but I think that's where we're going to end up. I think we're going to end up with a national coverage determination with a maximum price on products that don't have studies, and then negotiated pricing on products that do have studies. And I think that makes sense to everyone. Everybody that I've talked to in the industry likes it. Everyone that's just in the industry now and is trying to make money in the short run will leave. They've all told me that, and that's great. They can go do their other things that they want to do. I'll still stay here and try to heal wounds. But I think that there is definitely a future in camps. I think everybody sees that, with the new society forming basically around camps. It is our future, along with a lot of other things. I mean, we've got cold plasma coming. We've got, electrical therapies. We have light therapies. There's definitely things on the horizon that show a marked level of effectiveness that's damn near, if not better than skin substitutes. So for the next several years, though, while those things get approved and get through the payment process and all that, skin substitutes are the only future we have. And in fact, Bill Tettelbach put on an article in Journal of Wound Care with some other of the famous names like Dr. Wahab and Dr. Armstrong and Martha Kelso that looked at Medicare data and found that if you don't use enough skin subs, you actually cost the system more money. So we're in kind of a pickle. We've got a systemic flaw in the way the government pays for them, which has caused the prices to go up too much and the spend to go up too much. But the prescription for that, sponsored by the largest in the industry, has been to just restrict access to products down to basically their products and several others that are no longer marketed in the United States. Well, what's going to happen in a couple of years when they've had an oligopoly? They're going to raise prices because they're capitalists and some of them are publicly traded companies, right? They're not stupid. So it's going to be a tumultuous time in our industry, but we'll get through it. And there'll be arguments and people will be yelling at each other. But at the end of the day, we're going to end up with a system where we're having national coverage determination and we're going to have reasonable payments for these products. And then we're going to start focusing on who can make a better product and what data can I bring to my physician to tell them that my product is better. And that's where I always like to be because that's where I win. And we're going to get there. So it's an exciting future for me.
Well, it's the history you've just given, and sort of the market dynamics you've just given, and even the solution that you've recommended. I was just at the CAMPS conference that was down in Florida, and you were there, obviously. And there was just listening to the different perspectives, of what I would call the commodifists versus the laissez-faireists and kind of this battle within the industry. I think it's good, right? Because these conversations have to happen. The conflict has to happen because we need to get to a
Yeah.
resolution. And to your point, if you look at the spend trajectory, and I love the reference to both Icarus and the Dutch tulip debacle. I'm a fan of economic history and Greek mythology. I think you've captured it. Once the spiral starts, and again, good intentions, people try to do the right thing regulatorily, but leaving holes that allow the spiral to happen. And then you have demonization, and then you have all these things that follow. I think there's going to need to be mature people with mature voices and people who are able to balance the needs of patients, the needs of the national treasury, and the needs to innovate. I think the worst thing we can do is to stop innovating, right? Because any system that stymies like that doesn't work in the long run.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what most people that are on the clinician side or the commoditists, and not necessarily all clinicians, they forget is because if we stop innovating, then what's going to happen? If you set a price at $100, everyone's going to take that limited material and they're going to find ways to stretch it and make it a lower quality to get the most out of that $100 that they can. So patient care will suffer. It has to. That's what Economics 101 says, right? So you have to leave mechanisms for innovation, and it's been very refreshing that, I argued with some prominent people at that camps meeting you were talking about my solution, which we did publish. It's called the Epic proposal, um, and yeah. So I mean, we didn't want to, but it was kind of funny. The government said, "Well, you can't really give us a solution because we can't discover it without it being in the public domain, or else you're unduly influencing a government official." So they must have wanted to read it because we had to put it up on LinkedIn. But and since I've done that, lots of people are mad at me, and that's okay. I can take it. I've got a thick skin, right? Um, I don't really care. I mean, if you go back and forth about how we could solve this and how we could move forward, you're all going to come back to the same thing. You got to eliminate the clawbacks. You have to control pricing. You have to set up a sort of competition among scientists who are pursuing evidence and not salespeople who are pursuing profit. And if in doing so, there will be enough money. If you do the right things every day and bring out better products all the time, the money will come. It's everywhere, right? So I think it's an exciting time. And I'm really excited for our future with camps, but also with some of the other things I think we've got right around the corner. And by that, at my age, right around the corner is if I can get out in 3 years, I'm going to be really excited.
Absolutely. So we have about 3 minutes left, and I, I, two things, and maybe we can keep it to a minute and a half on each. On LinkedIn, we talked a little bit about real world evidence and how you've kind of made a commitment to that with some of the data that you've used from our organization. So if you could spend maybe a minute and a half talking about what that commitment is with real world evidence, what you think the future is around that. And then I'm going to hit you with the last question at the end, which is if you had infinite time and resources, and again, this is going to be an interesting thing for you because that's kind of what you live, resources and time, right? And opportunity cost. What is the one problem that you would solve if you could?
Keeping it to a minute and a half on the first one's going to be tough. But so on real world evidence, yeah, we have made a commitment. It's interesting. My commitment to um, finding the best ways to treat patients with wounds has gone back a long ways, back to 2020, 2021, when I started working with Ryan at United Wound Healing, and some other folks that do mobile wound care. I didn't really understand the complexity of that until I was in the trenches with it. And um, at that time, we couldn't even use a skin sub in a mobile environment because Noridian wouldn't pay for them out west. And we had some folks there who I won't name who are no longer there and have thankfully retired. But we fought for years to be able to get them to realize this was not a surgery we were trying to do in a patient's home or a nursing home. We're just trying to apply this product. And we did a year's worth of, I would say, a year's worth of applications of skin subs that I think we waited over a year and a half to get paid for. So you want to talk about commitment? That was an enormous commitment to put that kind of money out and not know if the government was ever going to pay for it. But so since then, we've taken that evidence generated from lots of practices, actually, and the largest chunk being from United Wound Healing, of multiple different skin substitutes being used. And we've practiced in California that's done a beautiful data set for us, and another one in Tennessee, and another one in Texas, and another one in Arizona, another one in Minnesota. That have just given us nice data sets of their patient populations of anywhere between 40 and 60 patients that they've put on a skin substitute, and we're working to pool them in one effort and to propensity match them in those practices in another effort. We're looking to do a lot with the data, but my commitment is a randomized controlled trial does not at all look like what we see in the real world. And a lot of people talk about real world evidence, even CEDAR at FDA is talking about it, right? But there's just been such a tremendous amount of resistance to it because it's different, right? You don't have like the CBC from, you just don't have every piece of data that you might have from somebody that's in a hospital or a clinic setting. And the question we got to ask ourselves, does it matter? From a statistician's point of view, maybe you can find some cool correlation, but what we're really looking at is, did the patients heal faster or not? And you can't really see that in RCTs when we control for so many different types of patients. In other words, we weed them out because they don't fit. Real world is everybody fits because we're looking at everybody, right? So that's been my commitment. You know how much money I've spent on that effort thus far, and time as well. We will have several publications over the next year, looking at our products that we market, looking at other people's products, sometimes comparing them, and sometimes just looking for a treatment effect based on whether it's a camp treated patient or not, because that's what needs to be done. So the last thing you asked me, Zweli, was something that I've been passionate about. There's two things. One of them is kind of whimsical and crazy. I have this idea about a line of toys that I want to make for kids that were as destructive as I was, or that are as destructive as I was when I was a kid. I used to like to blow up things and crash things and wreck things. So that's a secret idea that I'm not going to tell you the sauce on. But the other one comes out of my microbiology background, and that there's really no energy problem in the universe. If you just go outside of the ionosphere, you've got unlimited electromagnetic energy from the sun. But how the hell do we get it down to the surface of the earth, right? I mean, that's unlimited clean energy. How do you transmit it? Pretty darn difficult. And I won't digress too far on that point to get onto my larger point that I think that there's a biological system in which we can totally reduce hydrogen. And then I think there's another biological system in which we can bind it and make it safe for transport, so we can go to a hydrogen-based future. Whereas right now, in small quantities, hydrogen's great, and we can just have all of our hydroelectric dams reduce hydrogen for us at night when the power demand goes down to a limited amount, and we can chemically reduce it. But when you put it in a tank that's the size of maybe 5 gallons, you can take out a city block if it gets too hot. So there's some problems with that infrastructure, right? But that's what I think about as biological systems. My daughter in the Coast Guard has worked with microbes that have been designed to eat up, oil that's spilled. I think that there's a microbe and a colony and a design and a system designed for us to reduce hydrogen with that then can be burned to power our cars and provide energy in an extremely clean way that the only emission is pure water.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I've read a little bit about that. I will say I barely understand it, but it seems fascinating. And over the course of the past hour and a bit, I think that people, the viewers, will enjoy sort of the eclectic views that you bring. But what I enjoy is, well, I don't mean a pejorative at all. I think what I've enjoyed knowing you for the number of years I've known you, is that there's the eclecticism that you bring and a different way of looking at the world, but also the discipline of having to produce things that return value to investors. And so it's always interesting to see people who have both those aspects to them. And ironically, in wound care, you find a lot of them because it's sort of all the
Yeah.
misfits end up in wound care, and myself
So you've
included.
alluded to the fact that I'm old and now I'm a misfit. Wow.
I'm a misfit. I'm a misfit. I tell everyone I'm a misfit, but I'm a good misfit. I swear. So I've enjoyed the past hour. Hopefully, the viewers will enjoy what elucidation you've brought. I've learned in about 20 minutes of you walking through the process of the economics and the regulatory and the interplay more in 20 minutes than I've learned in a year. And I just think it's incredibly valuable because I think people forget the ecosystem of wound care, that there's this massive ecosystem and there are many participants. And I just, on the podcast, want to bring all these people together and really show how wide and varied this wacky world of wound care we live in is. So I appreciate your time, John, and I really think that you bring a lot of value in the market. You bring a lot of value to the partners you work with, and I've seen your dedication to patient care. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Zoe. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, folks, that is, as I indicated at the start of the podcast, the great, inimitable John Schroder. Again, this is the Open Wound Research Podcast, and we'll see you next time.